Thank you everyone for joining us at this GW4 Open Research Week session. Just to let everybody know, this session is currently being recorded. There will be a section later in the session where we will ask for people's thoughts to participate. If you would like to do so via camera and microphone, you can. Otherwise, you can in chat. The chat is not being recorded, just so you are aware. This is the session for opening up publications reflecting on the rights retention strategy. I'm Sean Carr, Research Support Librarian from Cardiff University, and I will also be presenting with Kath Borwick, who is from the University of Bath. And then we'll also have a little bit of a talk from Rachel Williams, who is a reader in Human Resources Management from Cardiff University, but I'll get to that in just a bit. So just a brief overview over what this session is going to look like. I will be providing a quick introduction to the concept of rights retention, just to make sure everybody's on the same page. Kath will be providing an overview of what GW4 is doing with rights retention, where we are with that. And then we'd like to open up the conversation and ask everybody here what their thoughts are on rights retention, what your experiences are, and Rachel will be kicking that off to get everything started. If there's any issue whatsoever with the screen sharing, please let me know, but I will just go ahead and get started. This is the overview on what rights retention is, and I'm afraid I have to start with copyright. I won't stay here long, I promise. Just to cover the basics, in the UK, if you create something, you own the copyright to it, you and your co-authors, if it's an academic article. This is an automatic thing. You don't have to apply to anything, you don't have to pay a fee, and therefore you can decide what you want to do with the copyright that you own. This is in the UK, however, it is very similar in other jurisdictions as well, so do keep that in mind. However, what tends to happen with academic publishing in particular is publishers have a tendency to like to have control over the things they're publishing. So they'll often present authors with a copyright transfer agreement or exclusive license to publish, which will essentially have rights transferred from the author over to the publisher. Sometimes that will be full copyright reassignment. Sometimes that will be rights to distribution. So it sort of swaps the relationship between the author and publisher into a reverse. Rather than the author providing their work to the publisher to publish, they are now put in a position where they have to appeal to the publisher for rights to use their own work, which is something that is a little bit questionable and in some ways. And organizations such as Coalition S and GW4 that are working with rights retention believe that the author is and should remain the owner of their intellectual content of their article and are seeking ways to ensure that they can retain the rights and control of their work. So moving on to rights retention, which is where this comes in, it's based on the simple principle that you own your work and you can decide what you want to do with it. The rights retention strategy focuses on authors retaining the rights and control of their author-accepted manuscript, which is their intellectual property, and assigning licenses as they see fit. The published version, with which publishers will have worked on the copy editing for or the layout, has some additional permissions and copyrights associated with it, but the author-accepted manuscript is always meant to stay in control of the author themselves. So funders and universities are working to ensure that they can, in fact, retain control of their work. I apologize if this is a bit messy at the moment. We'll get into a little bit more of a substantial example in just a second. With, I think, the next slide. Yes. Okay. So I have an example here of a rights retention implementation, and I just want to say straight away, this is an example. It's from the University of Edinburgh, which published their rights retention policy in 2021, which I believe was the first one in the UK, but not the first one in the world. But this is the University of Edinburgh. This is the one that they have made for their academics. It suits them and their institution. Other institutions will do things slightly differently, but there will be some elements that are sort of consistent, so you can get an idea of what rights retention looks like in practice. So there will generally be two elements to a rights retention implementation at universities. The first will be an agreed license for use, and this is something that is agreed between the university and the author, usually automatically or done on an opt-in form, and it will generally grant to an institution a license to distribute an accepted manuscript under the terms of an agreed license, often Creative Commons. So this is an agreement that's made at the time of acceptance for publication. It's the first agreement made on any sort of work that is using rights retention. So as it is the first agreement, it then takes precedent over other agreements made later on. For example, if you make an agreement with the publisher to publish, the agreement with the institution stands as the first precedent. Then there is the distribution strategy that will be implemented for the rights retention strategy. And this will generally be the institution distributing the work that has been licensed to them in an institutional repository. So the work will be, the author will essentially give a right to the institution to license the work, and then the institution will put that work in the repository under the license granted to them by the author. Therefore, the author will retain some control over what is being done, and the work can be distributed with an appropriate Creative Commons license for, say, grant funding or policy funding or ref compliance, all sorts of things. It gives a bit more flexibility. Generally, these policies will be written with some flexibility into them, so you can opt in, opt out, or a different license can be applied if necessary. Generally, they will say that nothing will be posted online until first online publication, or there will be elements written in that account for embargo requirements. Again, it will depend on the institution, but these are the two general principles that you'll find in most rights retention implementations. Goodness, that's hard to say 6 times fast. Moving along, you will see these across the UK and also the world, but we're focusing on the UK at the moment. There are at least 39 institutions within the UK that are confirmed to have rights retention policies in place. Again, all will be slightly different, but they'll have some similarities. And then there are several institutions, about a dozen that I know of, maybe more, that are in the process of setting up rights retention policies. And that includes institutions in the Midlands Innovation Partnership, the Scottish Confederation of University and Research Libraries, and of course the GW4, which is where I will hand things off to Kath.
Okay, thank you very much, Sian. I'm Kath Borwick, and as it says, I work at the University of Bath in Library Research Services. I'm Scholarly Communications Librarian, and I'm just going to talk a bit about, if you like, the journey that the GW4 institutions went on from, I guess, the beginning of 2023. So yes, if you could move to the next slide, please. Thank you. So the scenario for rights retention in early 2023 in the UK was that the Plan S aligned open access policies had been implemented, including the Wellcome Trust policy 2021, UKRI and NIHR policies in 2022, and there were other policies that aligned with Plan S principles. And a big element of those was that they required immediate open access. So we'd been used to policies which allowed for embargoes, albeit a sort of maximum of embargoes allowed. But Plan S wanted immediate open access, so immediately on publication or as close as possible to the online publication date. So compliance with those policies via the green route, where the accepted manuscript or a version of the paper is deposited in a repository, required the inclusion of a rights retention statement in submitted manuscripts, which would then facilitate this immediate open access and kind of, as Sian has said, would take precedence over any publisher embargo policy. And the experience that that institutions had been having, authors, librarians, publishers, if you like, was that this was new and different, and it was quite confusing for a number of parties, and publishers would push back from this, and this might cause confusion for authors, and sometimes it usually fell to library staff to try to support those authors and to try and negotiate or to liaise with publishers. So it was quite a difficult kind of transition into a kind of a new world of rights retention. And there were definitely concerns expressed amongst some authors about how they could comply with the policy, but how could they, keep collaborations going, or their collaborators maybe from other countries on board or understanding this. There might be some resistance to it. So those were some of the concerns that were expressed. And it was just generally felt that more support was needed at institutional level. And this was something that was felt across institutions and across the scholarly communications community. So this really sort of led to the implementation of institutional rights retention policies, or IRRPs, as we've come to call them. And I think Edinburgh University was one of the very earliest to implement a policy in 2021, and very much it sort of referred back to the Harvard Scholarly Communications license that we'd been aware of in previous years, if you like, but hadn't been able to implement in the UK for various reasons relating to differences in copyright policies between the US and the UK. So as Edinburgh sort of took the lead, other universities started to follow, and the policies started to sort of mount up. And there are sources where you can look at which institutions have implemented policies. And as Sian has said, that's now around the 40 mark. So next slide. Thank you. So where were GW4 libraries with rights retention? I think at that point, there was definitely discussions going on around the possibility of the institutions exploring and implementing their own policies or pilots. And there were pilots at other institutions which had sort of been a preamble to policies, or to sort of do a bit of finding out, putting a toe in the water to see how it would work with a more institutional approach. But already there were consultations happening at within the 4 different universities, with research committees and with ADRs, with academics, with professional services, kind of generally with stakeholders, and proposals for policies were already being submitted for discussion and feedback. So things were happening at different rates at the different institutions. And at the same time, the open access and the repository teams were evolving their processes. They were working with authors and liaising with publishers to help make rights retention happen as it was at that time. So the GW4 library directors were keeping a watching brief and discussing the best way forward. And it was clear that collaboration was very important. And we'd seen that with other groupings of universities, where they felt that, to navigate and negotiate this period and this sort of innovation, it was really useful to share information, to support each other. And if a policy couldn't be implemented immediately or within the near future, then at least a public statement of support for rights retention would be a good idea. And that should happen sooner rather than later. So this was kind of early 2023. And it was agreed that that statement needed to express the GW4 institution's intent and commitment. So intent and commitment to support rights retention within their organisations and to work towards implementing policies. And that was this statement needed to be worked on and developed kind of alongside the development of any policies and the implementation of any pilots. So regardless of timelines for developing those policies. And so the statement, as I say, was alongside and was not to undermine any local processes or progress in rights retention policy development. Next slide. So the architects of the statement were really those 4 GW4 library directors from Exeter, Bath, Bristol and Cardiff, who worked together collaboratively over the time to discuss what the statement needed to consist of, the wording, who they needed to consult with, what it needed to contain, and the sort of look and feel of that. And they had a lot of help and support from Jennifer Evans and Joanna Jenkinson, who worked in the sort of management group of GW4, and Nicola Purdue, who was the communications officer. And the consultations happened with the GW4. So initially the board of GW4 approved the concept of developing a statement and were consulted along the way, along with research committees, the UKRN representatives, institutional research culture and environment leads, and PV C for research, PBC for research. So it's a difficult one to say in the plural. And also, crucially important was to look at other university statements, for example, the N8 grouping of northern universities, and particularly the University of Aberdeen, I think, was one that felt was a good role model. We felt was a good role model. So always through this process, there has been a kind of sharing and observing of what others are doing and kind of following their example, adopting the best practices. Okay, next slide. So when the statement was drafted, it was agreed that it would pull in and the shared principles derived from each institution's understanding of the importance and merits of open access and rights retention. So each institution had been discussing it, had been pulling out the key benefits, the reasons for doing it, and that it would sort of combine those kind of the philosophy of each of and the wording, if you like, and the approach and the perspective of each of the institutions, but that it should be action oriented. So it should look to the future. What are we going to do to support this and to support our researchers? How are we going to go about this? So kind of a declaration of intent going forward, and that it should be written in a way that reached the audience that it needed to reach. So researchers were key. So making it relatable to researchers and to other stakeholders in the piece, including the publishers, including open access teams sort of nationally and internationally. And that it should be reportable and promotable. So that's where the sort of communications advice came in. And it was important too that it should link with other activities and the wider narrative on research culture, so developing more openness and transparency, more equity and inclusion. And, you know, those were sort of principles, those were sort of goals that were being sought by all of the GW4 institutions and through this collaboration. And also key that it would align with other university statements to strengthen the overall intent for rights retention across UK universities as a whole. Okay, next slide. Thank you. So these were the proposed headings, and I think you'll see this borne out in the statement itself. I think we've got we will include with the slides a list of the references so you can link through to some of this, to the policies and to other information. But it should reiterate, if you like, or kind of emphasize the benefits of open access, to show that GW4 were supportive of open access practices that ensure research can have a positive social and economic impact, and to create a more transparent research culture, to give greater control to academics, and to give them more confidence that they can comply with the publisher's agreements, as mentioned earlier, these copyright transfer agreements or license to publish agreements, and still continue to follow through with rights retention, meeting funder requirements and requirements for the ref, making their work open and more available, more impactful, and also, but at the same time as kind of compliance, because compliance isn't everything, but to advocate the wider value and importance of retaining rights of authors, you know, that they could retain rights over their work, and that this would then facilitate the sharing of their work at a much earlier stage and without needing to go through difficulties with seeking permission from publishers and copyright holders. So the kind of broader aim for rights retention. And obviously increasing impact. So GW4 sought to design policies to increase access to and impact of world-leading research findings, creating more inclusive culture. So for authors across all disciplines, being able to publish in their chosen venue without barriers and with maximum impact on society. Advocating for researchers. So this is an important element, that the institution would provide support and training to increase awareness of the full range of options for researchers to make their outputs accessible, and emphasising the value of their work. And then sort of more widely increasing impact and access, making sure there were platforms for stakeholders to reach our research, including partnership events, relationship management, work of research impact officers. So all of those sort of things being part of the mix, and rights retention being in there as part of a package, really, of developing an open research culture. Okay, I'm nearly at the end of my slides. I think I've got a couple more, so just move on quickly to the next one. So collaboration was a really important sort of pillar of this, developing the statement. So alongside this, institutions wanted to keep liaising on the development of their policies and the progress of those policies through consultation with stakeholders and approval by the necessary committees and boards, to keep each other updated on timescale for launching those policies, to monitor any issues, any complex cases as they arose. So one of the, I think for all the institutions, one of the queries that had arisen in meetings with academics was that how industry partners might respond to this, and whether and where this might cause difficulties in collaborative research, both ongoing and in new agreements. So that was something that the GW4 library directors and open access staff liaised on, how to sort of respond to that and how to reassure and instill confidence in authors. And so this was this process of sharing and learning and providing mutual support that continued throughout the process. Next slide, please. Okay, so the statement was finally drafted, was redrafted, and was passed through the various consultative processes, and then it was finally published in November of 2023, accompanied by a blog. And there are a couple of quotes there which really sort of, if you like, encapsulate the aims of the statement and the aims of GW4 in collaborating on this. So just, if you read those, the GW4 Alliance is dedicated to working together to share resources, guidance and expertise designed to deliver a strong, robust and open research environment. The introduction of a joint rights retention statement is a tangible articulation of GW4's commitment to supporting researchers to retain control of their work, enabling them to achieve even greater research impact through collaboration. Open access generates a number of positive benefits, including increasing the quality, visibility, and accessibility of research, and allowing research and scholarly works to be accessed by as many readers as possible, regardless of economic circumstance, increasing the potential reach and impact as anyone can access and benefit from the work. And then Tracy Stanley from Cardiff University reiterated that Cardiff has benefited hugely from working with GW4 library colleagues to develop a joint position on rights retention and share resources and expertise. The joint rights retention statement demonstrates the strength of our collective commitment to open research and open access, and emphasises the leverage we have through collective working. So it's kind of the two elements of it which were so important. Next slide. Thank you. So just bringing us up to date, after this statement was published, both Cardiff and Bath launched rights retention pilots, and the rationale for this was kind of expressed by Rachel Kotarski, who the then head of Library Research Services at Bath, that there's still some unanswered questions regarding timing, institutional approach to copyright of staff, so different sort of nuances within institutional copyright or IP policies. So there was things to investigate, talk to legal teams, and figure out whether things needed changing or updating, how it was going to work at different institutions. Also, getting a feel for responses from publishers and how they were being dealt with. How can we best support staff to take an active approach to their rights, and how much support is needed? So all those questions were still there for us at Bath. So we needed to have a bit of time to run a pilot, investigate those issues, and then see how pilot participants experienced rights retention and any issues that came up. So we did need a policy, but more importantly, we wanted people to be ready for that. And by early 2024, both Bristol and Exeter had implemented their institutional rights retention policies, and come 2025, Bath and Cardiff policies are being launched. So Bath has just launched at the beginning of this year, and Cardiff to come soon. So that's where we are through that sort of journey. And I think I'm now going to pass back to Sian, and then to introduce our next speaker. Thank you.
Thank you, Kat. So we're now interested in having a bit of an open discussion with anybody who's here about their experiences with rights retention and questions they may have. And to kick things off, we've been able to confirm that Rachel Williams is here, who is a reader in human resources management at Cardiff University and participated in the Cardiff University rights retention pilot. She's here to discuss her experience. So Rachel.
Thank you, Sian. Thank you for the invitation. I did feel a bit of a fraud when Sian approached me because the process was just so easy. I didn't really feel that I'd done anything to justify talking to you. But I will run through what I did and just show you how easy I found it. My background, I'm on a teaching and scholarship contract. So although I've been around a long time, research has been fairly new to me. And I've been lucky enough that over the past 2 years, I've been on 50% research leave. So I've had a chance to actually get some studies going. So I've been working on a study with newly qualified veterinary surgeons and was ready to submit an article. Wasn't necessarily sure what I was doing, but I wanted it to be open access. I was planning to submit to Veterinary Record, which is a professional journal run by the British Veterinary Association and published by Wiley. At the time I was ready to submit, I saw information coming out about the rights retention pilot, and it looked interesting, didn't see any harm in inquiring about it. Got all the information. I was a little bit concerned, was it going to make it more difficult for the article to be accepted? But I guess I was just fairly trusting, and I was told, no, it's not going to make any difference at all. You should be okay. So I just went ahead, and it was, as far as I was concerned, literally taking the paragraph, sticking it on the bottom of my draft article and sending it off. I think the mention about having support was really important, because if I hadn't been able to email, get a quick answer to say, yeah, this is all you need to do, yes, see how it goes, I wouldn't have felt confident in doing it. So but knowing that I did have that support, it made a big difference. So I sent it off, crossed my fingers, and about 6 weeks or so later, it came back with a few peer review comments, and they'd taken the statement off. Hadn't mentioned the statement at all. So I immediately emailing over to Sian and saying, what do I do? Does it make any difference? So I was advised just to put it back on again and send it through when I sent through with my corrections, which I did. And a couple of months later, received just confirmation that it was going to be published. So it was a very simple process. So the article was published. It was very quick. There was nobody queried that the statement was there. I mean, it was just taken off. I remember Sian saying, look, it's a bit rude not to mention it. But it just all went through very easily. I haven't put anything to the test in terms of ownership or anything. It's an open access article anyway, so Wiley have been pushing me to publicize it as much as I can and share it. But I couldn't see any disadvantages. So as I said, I feel a bit of a fraud because I haven't done anything complicated in getting to this point. But I can say that it didn't make any difference in terms of getting it published. It took about an extra 5 minutes of my time, and it just seemed to make sense to me. So that was all I had to say, really. Thank you.
Thank you, Rachel. And I think hearing stories about how it doesn't cause trouble is just as important as finding the bits and pieces where there might be issues so we can address them in the future. At this point, if there's anybody else in the chat who would like to share some experiences or share some questions, we are more than happy to hear and listen. We're particularly interested in hearing how academics feel about rights retention and what your experiences have been or what your thoughts are. If you want to turn a microphone on and say something, please feel free. Otherwise, there is the chat, of course. Please remember this is being recorded, so whatever you're comfortable with.
There's just a comment actually in the chat, which is very nice. So from a colleague from Ulster University, just saying, not a question, just wanted to take this opportunity to say thank you very much. Writing from Ulster University, where we're working on introducing a rights retention policy. I've been emailing rights retention holding institutions asking for advice recently. Some of you may remember me. Yes, I remember you. Thank you for writing to us. Getting in touch with you, and the response I got was just amazing. Good wishes, great advice. Very high response rate. Thanks a million. Well, thanks very much. Yeah, it just kind of underlines how useful it has been for us in open access teams and in institutions to know that our colleagues out there are kind of dealing and grappling with the same issues and having success in getting through the various sort of jumping through the hoops and climbing over the hurdles and things that we need to do to get the policies in place, and to kind of really aim to make the whole experience easier and less of a burden for our authors in particular. But not to dwell on the negative, but yeah, that's part of the aim really, is to make it easier really for people to get their research out there without too much problem. Actually, there's a question there. Did Wiley advise why they had removed the statement? That's for Rachel. Did Wiley say anything?
No, they didn't say anything at all. They just took it off. And when I put it back on again, it didn't seem to make any difference. But I must admit, I didn't ask. I didn't want to rock the boat until it's actually confirmed. But no, they didn't say. And I don't know. It is possible that perhaps just in the peer review process, it was taken off accidentally. I don't know, but it did come off. But I put it back again, and nobody at any point said, no, you can't do this.
Oh, that's interesting. Is it in the published paper now? Or
No, it's
in the
not.
It's on the accepted manuscript, which is available through the institution repository.
Right. Oh, that's interesting.
Jason, you have your hand up.
It's really a question of the audience. I wondered if there was any other academics, researchers on the call, along with Rachel, who've applied rights retention in practice and what their experiences were.
Hopefully we'll hear something. If you have published using a rights retention strategy, would you be willing to just add a reaction, maybe a hand raise or a heart or something, so we can get a general idea. In the meantime, we had a question in the chat, somebody asking if there's an opt-out clause for authors. I think I can take that one to start. This will entirely depend on your institution. Most institutions I've seen have been implementing some form of opt-out. I know Cardiff University is looking at adding opt-out in their policy when it comes out. But again, it will depend on the institution. I do think it is the tendency to have an opt-out option. But some people are doing opt-ins to rights retention. So it really is a different approach depending on where you are.
I think from my experience of hearing people talk about their policies, they do have an opt-out clause, and we certainly have an opt-out in our policy. It's not that authors need to ask permission to opt out. They simply have to notify us so that we know that they don't want to either apply a CC BY license or they don't want immediate open access. And yeah, so they don't have to get permission or give any particular justification for that. They just need to let us know so that we can apply the normal publisher embargo if there is one. We are kind of recording reasons for opt-out, but we haven't, well, I say we haven't actually had any opt-outs yet. But I think I heard a talk from Aberdeen University who've had a policy for about 2 years, and they said they've had 3 opt-outs in total over that period. So it looks as if opt-outs are quite, few and far between. But yeah, it kind of reassures authors, I guess, to know that there is that if there are reasons that they really do wish to opt out. Obviously, opt out can mean that it's more difficult for you to comply if you have a Plan S aligned funder policy to comply with. But yeah, so we would normally just let authors know that is a potential issue with opt out, and I guess that's the same across institutions.
Kate, you have your hand up?
I was just wondering whether, Kath and Sian, whether you knew, or anyone else in the room knew from your talks with other libraries, whether people have received pushback in certain areas, say from particular publishers or perhaps particular disciplines who might have those industry partnerships that you were talking about before and might have some concerns about this.
Yes, somebody has mentioned InderScience in the chat. There have been some publishers that have been a little bit tricky. I think what we're seeing these days is publishers are starting to push back and see where they can go. Rights retention is, while it has been established as a possibility since the early 2000s. It is still a fairly new thing in the UK, with policies at universities being put in place starting in 2021. So everyone's still feeling out what's possible and who's going to give where. With the UK institutions setting up all of these policies and sharing as much as we have a lot of consistency across universities. Of course, there will be details different in each place, but there's a general core that's similar. So publishers are now trying to push at that and see what they can convince people is and isn't okay, because what we establish now as what is and isn't okay will become the precedent moving forward. Because at the point right now, there isn't really a precedent that we can look back on and say, no, you can't do that, publisher. That's not allowed. Everyone's trying to gain what little footholds they can. The good news is we haven't seen a huge motion for one publisher or one field or one thing going in one particular way. I can't speak to industry context. Maybe Kath can say something there. But I think there are the occasional problems that come up, and we're working with them as best we can. And there are negotiations going on with institutions in consortium deciding what they are willing to capitulate on, if anything. Kath, do you have anything you might want to say about this sort of thing, or maybe industry contacts, that sort of thing?
At Bath, we certainly had some apprehension amongst some authors or some of our researchers and some of our senior academics. But that was more that they were worried that issues might arise rather than that issues were arising. So I don't know if there's anyone here from any institutions where they have had actual, concrete issues with industrial partners, but I think it was just they were worried about talking about this stuff with partners who were either from abroad, international collaborators, or with industry partners that they might not get it or they might be apprehensive about it. But yeah, I mean, I suppose one of the reassurances that we gave them was that if there are issues, there is a possibility of opt-out, although you do need to comply with your funders policy. The caveat to that. But yeah, so we haven't actually had, since then, we haven't had any people, coming to us with actual problems of objections being raised by industrial partners or difficulties with openness and the timing of making things open and that kind of thing. So it hasn't arisen for us anyway. And I think we were able to sort of reassure them and that, you know, making it easier to talk to co-authors and it becoming easier because rights and rights retention policies were more prevalent, and becoming better known, and now it's sort of internationally. Rights retention is very important with colleagues, you know, sort of in Europe and further afield. So, you know, it's not the new concept that it was, I guess, back at the beginning of sort of 2023. But I don't know if anyone else has got any examples or things that they want to share. Or any more questions or any more comments? So we've got a comment in the
chat.
chat.
A reply to
Yeah.
something I said earlier, basically saying, there was, sorry, I'm just trying to rephrase. The comment was that was my implication about publisher pushbacks, perhaps not accidentally not including the statement. At Bournemouth, we do not currently have an IRRP, so all these experiences of early adopters are helpful. So I think that was a reference back to statements being removed without anybody saying anything. I'm wondering if there has been any pushback there. There's been a lot of silence from publishers. We sent out a lot of emails to a lot of people asking if they were okay, like telling them that these policies were coming into place, and usually we don't get anything back. I get the sense that publishers are waiting and being reactive, to see what they can and can't get away with.
I would just say that I was surprised they didn't say anything. So I put it in and I was expecting somebody to come back and say anything. And then it was sort of taken off and I put it in. And there was just no mention of it. So although I didn't want to rock the boat, I almost felt that I'd gone through the process and had it counted because they've not acknowledged that I was doing anything any different to anybody else. But I'm assuming that because I did it, that it's all okay.
What have been the staff resource implications to support implementation has been asked in chat. I think that's going to depend a lot on the institution and what their resource availability is. My understanding has been there's always been a need to have somebody who's available for support, who can answer questions and liaise with authors as they have issues. Sometimes that can be picked up by people already in the institution. I think it depends on the publishing burden at the institution. Kath, I think you've had a bit more active experience with this, with Bath having established their policy at this point in time. Do you want to say anything about staff support?
We didn't increase our staff support in any way. We weren't able to do that. Although we have employed some students, sort of Bath University students, through the student union, so on working sort of part-time with us. And they, for instance, a PhD student helped with compiling our publisher list for when we sent out the notifications to publishers, you know, notifying them of our coming policy. That was really useful just to have a bit of help with that. So I can say we did have a bit of help with that. We were able to pay for that from our UKRI Open Access Block grant. So incredibly useful to have someone great knowledge of Excel and kind of crunching numbers and data and things and getting mail merges set up and that kind of stuff. So yeah, we did have help with that. Had we not had that help, we would have had to have done it ourselves somehow along with our other work. But I think, I mean, this sounds a bit idealistic, but there was great motivation in the team to get a policy up and running because it felt like quite a sort of wobbly walkway. Dealing with rights retention through when the UKRI policy came in, and we, you know, the authors including statements and not quite knowing what the pushback would be and how to help, you know, authors navigate, and not having that sense of the institutional support. So we were really keen to get the policy through. and to feel that we did have that support and that, you know, it's on a sound footing. So I think that kind of gave us a sort of energy to you know, to put in the effort to make it work, which I know might not work for everybody, you know, with smaller staff numbers. I guess we've got sort of 3 full-time and 1 part-time, and as I say, the student who was helping us. So that was, yeah, that meant that it was, you know, less difficult, I guess, if you know, you have a smaller number of staff. But and yeah, we found it really useful sort of drawing on help from colleagues, networking with colleagues in GW4 other open access teams, and, you know, just sort of further afield as well. So, and JISC have been really helpful. So that kind of help has been really important, and that kind of reassurance, I think. Sorry, that's a bit of a long-winded answer, but yeah.
No trouble at all. Actually, Peter Finlay has posted a link to a JISC IRRP channel available through them with additional resources, which I have participated in, and I can say it has definitely great resources. So that's wonderful.
Yeah.
We are coming to the end of our time here. If there are any further questions, I'm sure we'd be happy to take them. But if people need to go, I completely understand. Thank you very much for joining us at our rights retention session for
Thank you.
GW4 Open Research Week. And hopefully we'll see some more participation over the last few sessions, and rights retention will be great going forward into the future. So thank you for coming.
Thanks, everybody.